What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back into the CRW podcast here for episode 210, our UCF preview and predictions. The penultimate game of this 2024 season for WVU, final home game, senior day there for the Mountaineers. It's going to be the true blue game there in the stadium as they welcome in the UCF Knights. West Virginia still searching for bowl eligibility. Times are bad right now throughout Mountaineer Nation, as kind of they should be. Struggles at home. Got one more chance to get a home win right now, and we're going to talk about that throughout the episode, see if we think West Virginia will be able to pull off that home win that they so desperately need and the fan base so desperately desires. But, of course, we'll also talk some Big 12, take a look around the conference, and make some picks in those games as well. But joining me to help me do that, of course, my two great co-hosts, we've got Steven.
What's going on, everybody?
And Bradley.
What up, what up, what up?
All right, gentlemen. So all three of us here together again, and of course we're going to dive into the UCF game momentarily. We'll dive in on the preview of that, talk matchups on each sides of the ball as we always do, give our key to victory and our score predictions. But before we get there, we haven't all three been together in a couple of weeks or so now. Seems like, a couple of games since we've had a chance to chat, and in that time, it's been a bit of a roller coaster for WVU as this whole 2024 season has in its entirety. If you look back to where we were at the beginning of the season, excitement at a fever pitch, the hype at an unbelievable level, Pat McAfee show in town, big noon kickoff, the fans really kind of feeling good about the program for the first time in 6 or 7 years, and then kind of go through the roller coaster of the season till we get to the point of after a bye week, after firing a defensive coordinator, we're looking at the Big 12 standings thinking we have a chance. And yet again, West Virginia loses a big game that could have kept them in the running when they had that chance to Baylor at home last week. And since then, there's been a lot of calls for Neal Brown's head throughout the fan base. And I mentioned, on the review for that game, I think rightfully so. And I think his job status is certainly up in the air. So I think that that's what we kind of got to lead off with here, gentlemen. We can't, ignore the elephant in the room. We got to talk about, the status of this WVU football program, where things sit, and kind of how you guys feel about where things stand after a year in which we thought we were going to have a really good season. We were all super optimistic on the preview show to where we sit now with 2 games left, only 5 wins on the season, only 2 wins at home. And it's been a bit of a rough year, and it's been a bit of a rough tenure, really, overall for Neal Brown. We're not going to go over all the numbers. We know about the record versus top 25. We know about the struggles this season. But I just want to know your all's kind of standpoint, where your feet are in the sand on this debate of what West Virginia should do moving forward following the end of this season. Are you judging it on these last 2 games? Have you already made your decision? How are you feeling about the status of the program and Neal Brown's job status and how hot that seat is for him? How are you feeling about it, Stephen?
I really did try to give this guy the benefit of the doubt for a really, really long time, but I think that I finally am on that train. I think that last year really was the show me year. This was kind of a bonus year in some aspects. And you came out and you got 9 wins last year, and you finished with a good bowl win against a UNC team that, at the time, a lot of people even said, we're playing a team that doesn't have their best players on the field. And that was true, but West Virginia still played a really good game in that bowl game for what I thought. But given all of everything that went into play with this season and how many opportunities, like you said, that you had to have a good season, and then not only have one, but then so many chances to save it, to become a good season again, and you just keep failing over and over and over. And then you're failing at home also, which is something I think that all of Mountaineer Nation could agree on. Even the most optimistic ones, I think that all of us could agree on. You have to win your home games. Like that's something you absolutely have to do. We get that, winning a Big 12 championship, winning a national championship, getting to the playoff, that's not going to be an attainable thing for WVU every single year. But it's not unrealistic to think that we should be able to go undefeated or near undefeated at home every single year. And I just think that for me is the straw that breaks the back. So I don't know. I think regardless of how these last 2 games end up in the regular season, I don't know. I think it's time for a change.
Yeah. I don't blame you. I don't blame you for feeling that way. think the record at home is, a big sticking point with fans, as it should be. I mentioned on the last show, if West Virginia doesn't win this game against UCF, it'd be 5 home losses, only the second time in all WVU football history that they would have lost 5 home games, and that unfortunately is just another check mark in the con side of the list there. If you're making the pros and cons for Neal Brown, and those cons continue to add up, unfortunately. So I don't blame you for feeling that way. But Brad, how about you? How are you feeling about Neal Brown's status here at WVU and kind of how the program sits and what you would do kind of moving forward?
Yeah, I think I'm conflicted between like what I want them to do and what I think might realistically happen. I agree that we've hit a point, and I think for me, when it came down to Neal Brown and just like that decision, because again, we've supported him a very long time on this show, very very supporting, sometimes even more front facing than behind the camera, but it was always in support of the guy, but definitely just not getting it right. And so for me, I think what finally, as Steven said, the straw to the camel's back. Um, I don't I don't know what he could show me next year. I just don't. I don't think in year 7 or whatever it's going to be that you can show me any more than what you've already shown me. Like I just don't think that there's any world in which you're going to be all of a sudden the guy I want you to be next year. You're losing your starting senior quarterback. You've got a great Nico Marchiol who just pulled. You had a chance to kind of build some goodwill on that and really get some steam rolling on that, and you chose not to. That was a decision. That's something you believe in, and I don't know if it was the right call. And you can believe in that all you want to, but I think that you had a winning quarterback that hadn't lost yet, that was giving you options in offense that you hadn't had. Um, I just don't think it was the right call. But again, I don't get paid millions to make that decision. So for me, I just don't know. I think it's pulling the blindfolds off of that. But yeah, like I really don't think next year he can show me anything different than what he's shown me since he's been here. And just since he's been here, it's not been good enough. To that point, as to whether he's going to get fired or not, I don't know. I think it really comes down to this next game. I don't think you can lose. I think that battling from a position of 5-6 to hopefully not go 5-7 is so much significantly worse than being 6-5 and battling for a 7-5 season. I just, I just think that is absolutely killer. And I think that what's even worse, I've been gone for a couple weeks now, y'all. Sorry, had a tragedy in the family. Had to make some things for that and just couldn't work up other schedules. Didn't even really get to watch the game on Saturday. But one of the biggest things that I heard from it that worried me the most is the way that people talked about the way the team looking. We've definitely seen a Neal Brown team that wasn't the most disciplined in the world, but we never saw a Neal Brown team that gave up. Never, not once. And so I don't know if you could ever say you've seen a Mountaineer team that's ever given up once. If it is, it's been few and far between. And I think that if you lose another game, you get to a point of losing the locker room. And I think that if you get to that point, then that has been a catastrophic failure all the way around. I think that anytime you get to that, there's been so many wrong decisions in so many places that like this was just absolutely terminal, and there was nothing we could do to fix it anyway. So, you've got to win this next game and try to keep your team in it and try to keep that attitude right. Because if you don't and things go like that far south, then like that's going to be, I think, even more of a tragic outcome to this season. Going out on a whimper even it is just something that would be absolutely unfounded, or unthought of when the season started for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it really was. It was so far from our minds that we thought we would have this type of season. And I think that, you mentioned a couple things there that I think really go against Neal Brown as well. One of those being making the switch from Nico Marchiol to Garrett Green, because I talked about in the preview for that game that I feared that with him making that choice, that if West Virginia didn't win the game, then it would really reflect even more poorly on him, and the fan base would be on him even more, because you're like, hey, we've won 2 games in a row. Then you do something to throw off, kind of the momentum of this team, the chemistry that we've got going when we're winning, and we lose a game, and then fans are going to point to, him and put that on him yet again, as maybe they should. And then I also think, as you said there, this being a home game against UCF is probably a major sticking point to try and win this one. If I'm Ren Baker, I'm watching it extra close, because I don't know if you can come back from 2-5 at home. So sounds like we're all kind of on the same point here as far as where we're sitting on the Neal Brown thing, which is extremely surprising from us here at the CRW. As Brad mentioned, we've been big supporters, for a long time for the get-go. I've got a Trust the Climb hat up here on my wall. I've got a Trust the Climb t-shirt. I wore them to the Penn State game beginning of the year. I've got the Neil Breezy shirt. And so, sometimes things just come to that point. You come to what you feel like is a breaking point, and that's what I kind of feel like we're at right now with this WVU football program. I put that out on social media earlier today that I kind of feel like, just judging by kind of the things that we've seen, the moving on from the defensive coordinator, Ren Baker's statement that he came out with, about a month ago or so now. And since that time, we haven't really performed the best, especially when we had another opportunity to maybe do something, to right the ship and, they wanted him to give them a reason to keep him, and he hasn't done that. He's kind of done the opposite. And since then, you've seen other programs announce, hey, we're keeping our coach for next season. Florida did it. UNC did it. There's been others. And the fact that it's been, all quiet on the Western Front for West Virginia, I think speaks, volumes really to me. The fact that they made that stadium and have been mum ever since, except for making a defensive coordinator change, shows me that Neal Brown's job status is very much up in the air, I think. So I don't know. Maybe these two games decide it, maybe they don't, but we're all have come, a long way from being ardent supporters to now where we think it's time to make a change within this program as well. So that's where we all three kind of stand, which now leads me to my next question, and then we'll dive into the USF game, UCF, USF. I'm thinking of the old Big East days, I guess, but we'll dive into the UCF game preview. But my next question is, put your Ren Baker cap on, step into his Jordans for a minute, if you would, and tell me what you think he's looking at. Do you think these next two games are going to decide it for him? Do you think he's already made his decision? How do you think that he's feeling? And, what kind of would you do if you were in his shoes, Stephen?
Um, truthfully speaking, I believe with how Ren Baker has, kind of conducted himself as the athletic director so far, I believe that from the beginning of the season, it was um, kind of him watching him like that. I don't think this just started whenever all of the fan base decided to, to get loud whenever we lost. Um, I think with how last season went, I think Ren Baker was truly, watching how the whole season would turn out this year. And I just think that it's been a disappointment. So I don't think that these last two games will matter. I think what matters most right now, and I think that it's glaringly obvious for myself, but the thing that matters most right now isn't what he's necessarily going to do in these last two games, but really how West Virginia is going to be able to figure it out financially.
Yeah.
I think if there's a way that we could somehow figure that part out, I, I'm not saying in any way that we should go for Jimbo Fisher, but just to throw that kind of scenario out there, someone like that, they're already getting paid however many ample amount of money. Um, I don't know. There's not that many situations like that, but I think West Virginia.
Yeah, pretty much just
And
is Jimbo.
it's
But I mean, it's not.
unfortunate
It's
his family
crazy to have
doesn't,
that kind of
but
situation, though.
yeah.
True.
But I don't know. I just think West Virginia really needs to figure something out financially, and that's the kind of the catch-22 being a Mountaineer fan is, um, just honestly speaking, we are struggling to find NIL dollars whenever it once was really kind of pushing to be one of the top ones. And, West Virginia fans are more and more pulling their money out instead of adding their money in because of the way that the team is playing. And then it's having an adverse effect because then you got to find ways to give, to fill that void and be able to call it what it is and pay players. You got to buy your guys.
Yeah.
If you've listened to any of the recent news on anything about the what's going to take place on January 1st, West Virginia's got to be able to find $20 million in our budget that we didn't have already. And, that's money that 75-80% of that is going to go to the football team, so like, I don't know. It's a really kind of a terrifying time,
Yeah.
really to be in the position that we are in. Um, I'm still kind of upset that we passed up on Kurt Signetti. Knowing that he's a West Virginia
Me too
grad,
now.
played here. Obviously, his family has ties to West Virginia. I mean, it's no secret how well he's doing at Indiana, but I don't know. West Virginia's got to be able to find a way, and I do trust in Ren Baker's higher ability. I think that obviously Coach Kellogg with the women's basketball team is doing an amazing job so far. They've been rolling for 2 seasons now. Basketball team, other than one game this year that I won't mention who we lost to. But other than that game, I think we've looked fairly well. I mean, I know we've played against some lesser competition, but if you watched any basketball last season that WVU played, it wasn't that great, and even those games. Um, so I'm liking what I'm seeing on that end. But I only bring those things up to say that I like his higher ability so far. The volleyball coach also does well.
True.
So let's just hope that Rim Baker can do a good job in a search and find the guy that actually is, a good fit for us and not somebody that just looks good on paper and can't get the job done. I hate the fact that West Virginia is a school that constantly has to go to, I don't know, Dana came from Oklahoma State, but he was a first-time head coach. But if you're going to hire a head coach that's been a head coach, most of the time West Virginia has to go to Group of Five or lower level school to get that coach. So that's what makes it tough
Yep.
being in
And that's just
the
part of the
position we're
money
in.
issue.
Yeah, that's the huge part of the money issue. Like, you're not going to be able to pay a coach, anywhere near what a lot of these other schools in the Big Ten or the SEC, or even in the Big 12 now, Colorado. You know, I
Yeah.
think it's in some ways admirable to do what Colorado did, but I also think that it's ludicrous. It's absolutely crazy what Colorado did. They offered Dion an amount of money that they literally did not have in their school as a budget, but they knew that if they hired him, they would get that much money, and they were right. And I mean, look how much revenue that's brought in for their school, and you can't help but respect in a lot of ways what Dion in Colorado has done as a university. I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm an athletic director, I would model what I'm doing in some ways after that, at
Well, and I
least.
think that goes like right along with what you're talking about with like the money and everything. Because to me, this is happening at like the worst possible time for it to happen for Rim Baker to potentially have to make
Yeah,
this move. Because as you mentioned, the 20 million going to have to do the revenue sharing soon. The university's already in debt, had to cut programs at the actual school level at the university. So it's a bad time for it to happen monetarily. But I think when you look at it like that, you also have to look at it from, but if we don't make this move and we continue to be this mediocre 5-6 wins year after year, then that's going to hurt us more on the back end with people not supporting the NIL, people not buying the season tickets, people not coming to the game, which is not giving us the concessions, which is going to hurt us overall if we continue to go down this road. So I think if you're Ren Baker, you got to look at it as an investment in the future. The fact that you're going to have to pay these coaching staff's buyout, pay Neal Brown's buyout, and go out find a new staff and pay them as well. But I think how you have to think about it. In that way, kind of be smart and be ahead of the curve, much like you were talking about with Colorado. They're making an investment, more so than what they even had, kind of stretching themselves thin there. And West Virginia is going to have to do that as well. They want to make a coaching move this offseason, following this season. But I think if they're interested in being competitive in football right now, where you actually have a chance to be competitive with this 12-team playoff, this is the chance to try and do all you can to make that happen. So I think if I'm Ren Baker, I'm finding a way to get this done. I think, as you said there, Stephen, these two games probably don't go a long way, one way or the other. He's probably already made his decision. We know he already keeps a list. He's probably already looking at some other coaches. And if I'm Ren Baker, I'm, judging the tune of the fan base. I'm judging the attendance on Saturday. And I'm probably seeing that. And I'm probably thinking, regardless of the results of that game, that it may be time to make a change. But if you lose, then it definitely pretty much just makes it an almost certainty. If
yeah.
I'm Ren Baker, in my opinion, that's just kind of how I feel about it. Is you've got to find a way to make it happen. Rob Peter to pay Paul, do what you got to do. But you want to be a successful football program, you got to make those moves even when you feel like you can't do it. So I think that's kind of how I feel about it. But Brad, what
Well,
about you? How do you think Ren Baker's going to think about this?
I'm gonna
Well,
let
I
you go,
think
bro. I wanted to say real quick,
Go ahead.
for me, I think the glaring thing is like most people are like, well, West Virginia will never be back to what they once were, in terms of like how good they were at football. I don't believe that. If you're
You
telling me
can
that
be.
a school like Boise State or a team like Indiana can make it in today's college football world, but a team like West Virginia can't, I'm not buying that for a second. I think West Virginia very much can get back there, and it's all about these types of decisions. But I just want to say that. You can go ahead, Brad.
No, I agree.
no, it's all good because I was going to kind of touch on that a little bit, and I was going to pivot anyway, just a little bit. So it's probably good that, and like I agree, but I also am starting to feel more and more like West Virginia really cannot compete when it does come to this big money. And I know Indiana right now, but I think that we've had so many cases of like an Indiana or even like a Boise State or something like that, where somebody has like a great year and then falls off. I mean, you look at like TCU, you look at some other schools we've had in the past that have that really great run and then fall off the next year. Iowa State, like it just happens. I feel it goes that way. So we could be looking at Indiana next year and like, oh, they just had the perfect mixture. Kansas, a couple years ago, and then falls off again. It just seems to be happening in college football a lot right now, where you just happen to get this, 1 year of team that gets a great buy-in and this great cocktail, and then the next year it's just not the same thing. And so unless you're a predominantly strong foundational program with that kind of money and infrastructure built in, like the top 10 schools are, I think that the chance of cracking into that is getting so much more tough. Right. And so where my frustration lies is when I look at a school like Boise, which now has a chance to get in over a Big 12 champion because it's the top 5 rated conference champions,
Right.
not the Power 5 champions. So Boise State could jump a Big 12 champion if they're rated higher, even though they played a weaker schedule. And so I'm looking at the Big 12 and I'm saying, why am I killing myself every year fighting this grueling schedule where every team that we go into, right? And that's like the whole draw of it, which I agree is a good draw. If that whole stipulation's not in there, if it's a Power 5, then great. But if it's just whoever's the highest ranked out of any conference, I don't understand it. Why even be in the Big 12 at that point?
Because your competition is more consistent with what you're going to be playing in the playoff. Because, I mean, it's great what Boise State's doing, and if they do get to the playoff in that aspect, then that's great. But then, you know what I mean? Like, Ash Janty is a phenomenal player. I'm not taking anything away from
Mm-hmm.
him, and they are a good football team. But I'm not, I mean, like, you're not going to make it to the national championship and win the game as Boise State with as much other competition that you have in the field. Like, and if they do,
But
then
you tell me, would
I'll
you
eat
rather
my
have a
words.
whole year to get your team together and then have a chance to win 3 games to win it all? Or would you rather play a whole season against teams you don't know if you're going to win or not and hope that at the end of it you get to go?
And then also the other thing about it is like
It's
speaking of,
interesting debate.
it's the money. You get a lot of money in shared revenue, TV revenue, things of that nature from the Big
Mm-hmm.
12 conference every year. That's
That's
why
Yeah,
you
yeah.
hope that your conference wins the national
I
championship,
agree.
because it's not just the school that wins the national championship, your entire conference benefits.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
think that's the big difference for me is just the difference that you
yeah,
get from the money you get from being in a Power 5, Power 4 now, whatever conference
yeah.
versus being in a group of 5. Because I think there is an argument to be made to what Brad's talking about. Because I mean, if
Oh
you
yeah,
think about
yeah.
when
There
West
is.
Virginia was in the Big East, that's kind of what we did. We'd have great seasons and then go to a BCS bowl. When then we only had to just win the one game and win a BCS bowl and look great. And we did that every time we went to the BCS bowl game. And now you'd have to win like 3 games, which I think you potentially could do. But also, to your point, Stephen, I agree with that as well. That I think being in the Big 12 makes you kind of have to build that depth that's going to give you a better chance to compete against some of those higher ranked teams, throughout that playoff. So, you can make an argument for either side. Really, I think the money at the end of the day is what probably makes me happy that West Virginia is in a
Yeah,
Power Four conference. But I understand where you're coming from, Brad. But I also think it goes back to the fact that you feel that way now. Also shows just kind of how far we've fallen, as a football program lately, to be honest, because
I
if you
feel like
think
we
about
can't
it
compete.
previously, like even before when we were thinking a couple of years ago, once Texas and Oklahoma left and we saw the teams that were going to be remaining versus us, and we recruit at a similar level. Our NILs are at a similar level. So we thought, hey, we got a chance to take over this conference and go to the college football playoff, compete for Big 12 titles. And even
we
the
still do.
coaches said that this year,
Don't get it
and it
twisted.
didn't happen. So the fact that it didn't happen has us feeling like we can't compete at this level, but we definitely can. We match up
Mhm.
with these teams, like I said, recruiting wise, NIL wise, everyone in the Big 12 we match up with. But there is a disconnect right now that's not leading to wins on the field. And when you've given it 6 years, you can't point to anything else besides coaching.
Right.
Yeah, but I think that I'm even pivoting it from that. I mean, look at BYU has done everything right, lost 1 game, and now they're potentially missing out on the college football playoff.
Well, they're going to get
So
in if
even
whoever wins the Big 12 is going to get in. The thing is now is are they going to get the first round bye? Because like you said, it's the first round bye that
Right.
Boise State could
But
steal
see,
from, but they're going to get in. Whoever wins
that's
the
my
conference
issue with
championship.
things, and I'll say that I don't buy into the whole SEC Big Ten. They're better than they got better fan bases, yeah. But why should a conference like the SEC, who has 4 teams that have 2 losses or 3 losses potentially by the end of the year, and they're going to get 4 teams in, the Big Ten's going to get 3 in when they only have legitimately two that should be in there, and we're going to overload the college football playoff with two conferences, teams from two conferences, and then not give anybody else a chance, and then say that those two conferences are better because they win the national championship every year. That's what's going to be my
it's a
issue with
media
this playoff
bias, man.
format.
That's all it is.
Absolutely a
It's
media bias.
100%.
When is it coming down to what games are played on the football field and what the records show at the end of the year? Like, we've completely gotten away from records. So why even keep a record? Like, the records don't matter. All you care about is literally like one or two players you see on the field.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's ridiculous. It's frustrating,
It's
man.
very annoying and frustrating as a fan of any
It is.
team. I think that if you're a fan of the teams that are getting in, I would feel like, I don't know. I feel like it's cheap in some ways because it's a participation trophy. Like, you didn't earn that. You lost your big games. You didn't prove that you are a legitimate playoff contender when you have other teams that have proved it. I don't know. It's
Who
aggravating. And
knows?
I have
It's
no
going to
pot
be
pissing. I'm a West
controversy.
Virginia fan, but still.
They'll probably end up having to expand it again. You know how that goes. It's going to be interesting to see who ends up
16
getting in,
And
around
it'll
who ends
never
up
change. It'll
getting
be all the
seated
same.
where. Oh yeah, 100%. But we'll see who ends up getting in there. We'll be following that throughout the way, and then of course got to keep up with who's going to get in from the Big 12. That's an interesting race to see who's going to end up in that conference championship game. Now, as Brad mentioned, BYU has a loss, so who knows? It's several teams could end up in there, and we're going to preview some of those games within the conference here as we're into the final weeks of the regular season at the tail end. But before we do that, guys, we got to get to this game. We got to talk a little bit about the Mountaineers versus the Knights. Obviously, heated discussion there about Neal Brown, but that's kind of how it is when you're talking about somebody that's on the hot seat. You never know what that's going to dovetail into. And plenty to discuss there. I'm sure you guys have thoughts. So, hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, throw your thoughts in the comments on Neal Brown and what you think WVU should do moving forward. But moving forward on the season, West Virginia at Mountaineer Field here against UCF. West Virginia's 5-5, 4-3 in conference. UCF coming in 4-6, 2-5 in conference. But just to show kind of how dire things are for West Virginia right now, UCF actually favored. So West Virginia, a home underdog and a home underdog against a team with a losing record on November 23rd at 3:30 on ESPNU. Let's lead it off, boys. We're talking a little bit about the UCF offense because I think that's what you got to do here with this UCF team because they are extremely good on that side of the ball. Much like West Virginia, they came into the year kind of hoping to have some success, and it's kind of not gone that way. And they've made some changes because of that. They made a defensive coordinator change like West Virginia, but here on the offensive side, they've made a change also. Gus Malzahn, as we know, has always kind of served as play caller, but he switched that after the game against BYU. Tim Harris Jr., their offensive coordinator, now serves as the play callers. In his two games as the play caller, they've put up 56 points and then 31 points, so averaging 40 plus points with him as the play caller. Had over 600 yards against Arizona, over 300 rushing yards. They've had a bit of a quarterback carousel. They started the year with KJ Jefferson. He was a bit of a bust. They went to Ja'Cory Brown for a bit, but they finally landed on the guy that looks like the best, and that's Dylan Risk, a freshman quarterback there for the Knights. He can run like the other two, but he can throw the best as well. It's opened up their passing offense a little bit this season. He is the best passer of those three, 294 passing yards and 55 rushing yards versus Arizona in his first start. And he's the second highest graded player on the UCF offense at 82.5 grade, according to PFF. But the main man to watch on this UCF offense, none other than RJ Harvey, was really great last year, has even improved on that this year. He's having an absolute monster season, over 1,300 yards and 19 touchdowns. He's also added 200 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Highest graded player on the UCF offense, according to PFF, 85.7 grade. In the passing game, they'll target Kobe Hudson at the receiver spot, who we know, and then they have a good tight end in Randy Pittman, who has 328 yards of his own. But what you got to worry about with UCF is that rushing attack. They are the number one rushing offense in the Big 12, 263 yards per game, and they are the number two rushing offense in the entire country, only behind Army. They also lead the Big 12 in total offense at 465 yards per game, and they average 33 points per game. So we're talking about a West Virginia defense that's going to absolutely have their hands full against the UCF offense. few weeks ago when we were looking at this matchup, guys, I'd have felt a lot better about it because West Virginia's pass defense was terrible, but the run defense had been really stout. But here, the past couple of weeks, the run defense has shown some holes. Baylor got some things done on the ground last week, and if anyone can find a way to get stuff done on the ground, it's Gus Malzahn. It's this UCF offense. So a little bit nervous about this matchup here for West Virginia, despite the fact that they've had a good run defense throughout the majority of this year. But this night's offense is scary. How are you guys feeling about this matchup? What are your thoughts here, Brad?
Yeah, not great. Not great at all. I say UCF's been getting good push all year. Run game has been dominant. Like you said a couple weeks ago, when you're looking at the run defense and saying, man, that thing looks formidable. Then you see the last couple weeks, you're like, man, what do we even have on that side of the ball? And so I think that fingers crossed it doesn't go completely tumbling down and maybe we can, get a couple interceptions, a big turnover. I don't expect us to stop them, but again, our whole mentality all year has been bend, don't break. Games where we could accomplish that, we fared well. Games where we couldn't have, or we didn't, we absolutely got blown out in. So not feeling great. Not feeling great at all.
Yeah. I think that, I think this is kind of an advantage UCF if you're asking me right now. West Virginia, their first game under defense coordinator Jeff Kuntz looked good. Second game, not so much. Weren't able to force those takeaways. Weren't able to pressure the passer. Maybe you're able to do a little bit more in this one, but I don't know. It's just things are bleak right now. And then when you look at the UCF numbers, you hear about their offense, it kind of scares you a little bit. You're going to need a big game from your guys that have been big players for you, your TJ Jacksons, your Josiah Trotters. I think this is a game where both those guys are going to have to step up and loom large if West Virginia wants to slow down this UCF offense. But, Stephen, how are you feeling about their ability to be able to slow down this night's offense? What are your thoughts on this matchup?
I'm a lot like you guys. I'm not very confident in our defense heading into this game, especially when you add in like you just mentioned how powerful their offense can be. Coming into this season, I even mentioned I thought they were going to be one of the top teams in the Big 12 just because of that offense. And for whatever reason, they just haven't been able to bring it all together. They've played good football at times if you've watched them at all, especially in some of these latter games with that freshman quarterback that they've got. He's not only throwing the ball well, he's throwing some dots. I mean, he is throwing some really good looking footballs out there. So if West Virginia's secondary can't figure out a way to cover not just RJ Harvey, but some of those other guys lined up there at wideout, I don't think that we're going to have a good day. And I just don't. I don't know. I think it's going to be a field day for their offense, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you make there because much like we said about a couple of weeks ago, we'd have felt better about West Virginia's run defense, 2 or 3 weeks ago when it was KJ Jefferson or Ja'Cory Brown triggering this UCF offense, we probably would have felt better because it was a little bit more one-dimensional. Now, even if we do stop the run, Risk can throw the ball on us, and we know that if people want to throw the ball on us, they can throw the ball on us, quite frankly. That's just how our secondary's been this season. So this matchup worries us all three a little bit here, and I think that we can probably all agree that if West Virginia wants to win this game, they're going to have to score some points on offense to be able to do that. So let's talk about that a little bit now on that side of the ball. Take a look at the UCF defense here. As I mentioned, actually, prior to West Virginia making a defensive coordinator change, UCF did that. After the BYU game, they fired their defensive coordinator, Ted Roof, and Addison Williams took over the play calling there on that side. Been a bit better since he's taken over the job there, but they do have some defenders that are really opportunistic, particularly on their back end. Couple of DBs that have really stood out, one being BJ Adams, who has 2 interceptions on the year, the other being Mac McWilliams, who is their highest graded defender with an 81.7 grade. He's forced a fumble. He has an interception of his own. And they have a linebacker that has 2 interceptions as well in Deshaun Pace. So going to have to try and take care of the football against this UCF team. And maybe their best defensive player overall, of course, is the man in the middle. Brandon Yates going to have his hands full again with another big defensive tackle. Lee Hunter goes about 320 pounds. He has a sack on the year, and he's 77.7 defensive grade there, according to PFF. And not only does UCF run the ball well on offense, they do a great job defending the run on defense. They have the highest graded run defense in the Big 12 Conference with an 87.8 grade. So UCF's defense not been the best throughout most of the season, been a little bit better since they've made the change, but they have done a good job stopping the run, which doesn't bode well for West Virginia. We know that's kind of what we want to do, and also what we may have to do a little bit more often now. Garrett Green's shown, the ability to be more effective as a runner than a passer at times this season. plus, of course, the injury to Traylon Ray on the offense. West Virginia's going to have to try and find a way to get the run game going against what has been the highest graded run defense in the Big 12, according to PFF. But, Stephen, how do you feel about West Virginia's ability to, move the ball and score some points? Because we feel like they're going to be able to have to do that to be able to find a way to win this game against UCF. So do you think this West Virginia offense will be able to find a way to do that and have some success in this matchup?
I think it'll be interesting because I think in the first half we should come out, if it's consistent with how we've played in some of these games in recent weeks, we should come out in the first half and play pretty well on offense. But that second half, whenever you start to get, broken down in the run game, because they are good defensively at stopping the run. So West Virginia's going to have to do it all night, and I just don't think they're going to be able to do that. And then I don't know, they haven't proved anything receiver-wise other than Justin Robinson. With all due respect to the other guys, I'm not hating on any of them, but we just haven't proven that we can pass the ball that well or consistently well. I don't know. I'm trying not to be so negative about it, but they keep showing me every single week what I should expect. So that's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I think that the offense has been, a bit of a mixed bag. They've put up good numbers on the stat sheet, but it just seems like when it's time to make those clutch plays, they're never consistent and able to hit those plays in, that clutch time and winning time, which is really disappointing because that's something that we thought we had with this team. But I think something you mentioned there is going to be really key, and I wish I'd have made it my key to victory now, and that's, halftime adjustments, because you look at this West Virginia offense, they played good in the first half and terrible in the second half, particularly in the third quarter. In the third quarters at home in their past 4 home games. I believe it was Skylar Callahan that I got this stat from in the Baylor review. In the past 4 home games in the third quarter, West Virginia scored a total of 3 points across those 4 home games in the third quarter. So halftime adjustments are going to be a major key, and West Virginia is going to have to do a better job in the second half of this football game. If the offense does well in the first half, we're going to have to pay attention to that second half. So great point there, Stephen. I like you pointing that out a lot, and I think, like you said, this UCF defense does do a good job stopping the run, so West Virginia might have to try and find a way to make some plays in the passing game, which they have struggled with. So this is a bit of a wash for me as far as who has the advantage here, I think. But Brad, how are you feeling about this matchup between the West Virginia offense and the UCF defense?
Yeah, I'm definitely missing Nico Markiel in this. Again, I stand by that. I think that he just brought something to our offense that Garrett Green doesn't. But I'm not the coach, so I think that that's what we're going to run with. And so, I think that what we've been lacking is big explosive plays. We've been missing those big play abilities, and that's just made our offense awfully stagnant, have not been able to do much. So I think that we're going to come out and probably struggle the same thing. I also think that since you brought that up, I think that now we're probably going to score 21 points in the third quarter, and that'll probably be the only points that we score this
That'd
game.
our luck, yeah.
And probably still lose. So they're going to score all their points in the third quarter just to make you wrong, and then we'll still lose the game.
That would truly be Neal Brown fashion, right? Because it seems like he finds something that's a big weakness for us, and he works really, 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 really hard to correct that. And a lot of times he does, but then it's like whack-a-mole. Oh, now this is going on over here. You done screwed this up. So
your tackling rate can be extremely high if all the people you can't tackle just score touchdowns.
Yeah. I know. Well,
if we could just score more points than the opponent, guys, we would win every single game.
Shootouts.
But listen, we tried hard. The weather was fine. We had fun. All those things, right? We can always lean on that.
Y'all had fun. I didn't have fun.
So that's really where I feel about the offense, man. It had so much more potential, and it feels like it's just falling flat on its face. And I think that Nico Markiel gave you a look at that. And I don't agree with him not starting on Saturday. I think you should have kept with him. I think that he was, again, a look forward. And Neal Brown, you could say, well, I don't think people should lose their jobs because they got hurt. And you want to stand by that, that's fine. It's wrong. And, if that's the hill you want to die on, then, you got a few breaths left, brother.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of the situation whenever Garrett Green was the backup, though. Garrett Green came in and he also added a dynamic to the offense that we hadn't seen out of them that season.
But that's back when our offense couldn't throw or run the ball.
Yeah. Or was it Jared?
We just didn't have an offense.
JT?
There's both. I think he was behind both at one point. He was behind Daggy and then came in for him some, and then JT came in and then eventually took over. But
I think a lot of the reason that we usually feel like that is because it's hard to plan for a backup quarterback if you're a defense. But with that being said, I do absolutely agree with you. I think Nico has shown that he makes plays that I mean, Garrett Green is just obviously not capable of making. Like, he's capable of making better throws.
Mhm.
As good of a runner as Garrett Green is, I think he's the better runner. But as far as decisions when to run, I think that Nico has obviously proved that he's also better at that. I just, and in all aspects that I've seen so far, and this is from a person that has loved Garrett Green as the West Virginia quarterback, but I think that Nico Markiel is the better guy. So I think in some ways I do agree with you on that, Brad.
I mean, if you think he's 6'2", he's catching the snaps that are going high every game. You
True.
know, like he's at least got a couple inches, and he's at least stopping that. I mean, if you're not going to pull Brandon Yates and put him to a guard spot or something, you're going to let him continue doing the same thing all year. We've not had one game where we didn't have a snap that at least went a little high, like
Yeah,
noticeably high at that. And so, and he's tall enough to see over the offensive lineman. Garrett Green can't hit these short to intermediate routes because he's just throwing the ball where he thinks his guy's at. And that's not Garrett Green's fault. It's not his issue. But if he's not able to get out, they're expecting him to sit more in the pocket and pass and try to pick those lanes out. That's not his game. And I think that's why Nico Markiel shines so much, is because he was playing into the game the way they were playing it. And then we went away from it.
Yeah.
We said no. He made a couple bad decisions. So
yeah,
Yeah, you do add a lot to the passing game with the Nico, and of course you have that explosive side of the run game with Garrett. But I think that we have enough with Jaheim and CJ that they could pick up that slack that you'd lose with Garrett, and probably add a little bit of passing game with Nico. But I think at this point, the way I'm feeling, I'm pretty indifferent about it, honestly.
especially the
I don't
offense,
know
because Neal
why.
Brown controls it.
I guess I'm just like put whoever you're going to put out there and just try and win it. Try and win a game, Neal Brown. Whatever. I'm just pretty much. It is what it is at this point.
yeah. I don't know. It is amazing to me, and the one thing I will say that I'll give Neal Brown some credit on still is how he's able to still have a team that fights in some ways as much as they do, with how the fan base and how the season has gone. But to that respect, I mean, like, as soon as you have them showing some fight, then they come out the very next game when you have some hope as a fan base, and then they just regress every single time. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
don't know. A lot of times, what's that old saying is like that the stuff that you see from the players is kind of a reflection of the coach, how that they are on the
Oh,
field, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
And to me, the one thing that keeps popping up that I think is starting to be like there's no other explanation than it being a reflection of the coach is the fact that when it's the biggest game, when it's the biggest moments, when the lights are the brightest, we fold like a lawn chair
yeah,
every time. And so I'm like, that's it. I mean, that's just the players taking on the coach's personality, man. That's the only thing I can put to it because I see the talent. I've seen other stuff, but when we can't win a big game yet again and again, I don't think it's on the players necessarily.
Can't even beat a winning team at this point. I don't think we beat a winning team this year so far still.
No.
I've said it all season. I don't think it's a player issue. I think it's a coaching issue.
Yeah, we're all in agreement there, but we're hoping that the West Virginia offense comes out continuing that fight that Steven talked about because who knows, maybe some dire weather, students probably not going to be around, attendance might not be the best. So this is really one of those games where,
Yeah, students are on break too.
you don't have the Big 12 title to fall back on. You don't have the being competitive in that race. So now we see what you're really made of. How many guys are still going to be bought in? How many guys are still going to fight when there's not as much left to play for? So that's going to be interesting to see because they come out and they look like they lose a team. That's going to reflect even worse on Neal Brown. But hopefully the West Virginia offense is able to put some points up because I think they're going to have to. I think West Virginia's best case scenario is they're able to make this thing a bit of a shootout, a bit of back and forth, and maybe try and have the ball last because I don't know if you're going to stop the UCF offense. So West Virginia's offense is going to have to do something there. But those are our thoughts on the matchup, guys. Let's talk keys to victory in this one now. Final home game, True Blue at the stadium there, senior day for the Mountaineers looking to win a home game for the first time in several weeks, looking to win only their third home game of the season. Can't have a winning home record, but you can avoid 5 home losses if you can find a way to get this one done. And, playing for pride at this point. Playing for pride at this point, and we're going to see what happens. But what are the keys to get it done for the Mountaineers? What's it going to take to get that victory on Saturday, Stephen?
Well, I think more than anything, I think West Virginia has to have good defensive play. Um, I think if you can put yourself in a position in the late game to have it close and winnable, that's your best chance for West Virginia. because it's like I said earlier. I think this offense is one of the better offenses we've played all season, which is saying something. I don't think that their record really reflects how good that they are offensively. I think it more reflects how bad they've been defensively at times. Um, but with that being said, they've also played some pretty good defense at times when needed. So West Virginia's going to have to bring their A game on both sides of the ball, but more I think defensive play is the main thing that we have to do well. If we can
I
hold
like
them to under around 25 points, I'll say I think West Virginia has a good shot of winning the football game.
I like it, and I'd agree with that. That's been a good formula for West Virginia. If they've been able to get around 30, keep the opponent under that, they've been able to win, games like that. You look at the 31-24 win a couple weeks ago, the 31-26 win against Arizona as well. So it's good formula there for West Virginia. For me, I think that it falls on what we've talked about a little bit throughout this episode. It's the rushing battle. Winning the rushing battle to me is the key in this game. We know West Virginia wants to run the football. They did a better job of it last season. They haven't done a bad job of it this year at times. They ran the ball well against Baylor in the first half, not so much in the second half. But if they can move the ball, they've got a chance. But in that same token, they have to stop Baylor's rushing attack as well. They're the highest graded run offense, not only in the Big 12 with a 90.9 grade, but they're in the top 10 nationally with their rushing offense grade. Mentioned they are the number 2 rushing offense in the country. So West Virginia, stop the run and run the football a little bit yourself, not only because that's what you're good at and what you want to do, but I think you want to keep that UCF offense off the field as much as possible. So let's see a little bit of that ball control Neal Brown offense, and let's get our rushing game going and not allow them the chance to do the same. So that's my key. What about you, Brad?
Yeah, and it feels like it's been this, or at least in some form from somebody, some way, all year this year. Turnovers have been it. We've seen a little bit more of them in the last few weeks. When we've been in games, we've been getting them and not been giving them. So, Garrett Green's got to, if he's going to be the quarterback, he's got to play a clean game. Picks have been killing us, And if he's not taking control of that ball, then we got to make a switch. You got to go out here with all intentions to win this game, no matter what it takes. And whatever it takes, you got to win this game. To me, that means turnovers. We're not going to be able to stop their offense, but if we can get a ball to bounce our way and we can keep a ball from bouncing theirs, then I think that's what's going to make us win this game. Because outside of that, man, I'm not feeling too positive.
Yeah. I'd agree with that because I think, that's what the big difference for me between the Baylor and the Cincinnati games were, Cincinnati moved the ball, but we forced turnovers. We pressured the passer, and that was the difference in the game. Baylor, we didn't force turnovers. We give up 49 points. So definitely think that's a major key. Haven't done a good job taking care of the football and haven't done a good job forcing turnovers. That's why we're 5-5. So definitely a major key in this one. So those are our keys to victory. Now let's talk about if we think the Mountaineers will be able to pull off said victory. Score prediction time, gentlemen, here on episode 210, our UCF preview and predictions. Brad, come right back to you again this time. Let you lead off the predictions. Does West Virginia get it done? Do they finally win a home game for the first time in a while in Morgantown on Saturday? What's your thoughts? What's your prediction?
Yeah, no, fellas, I'm not feeling good. 42-21 was UCF.
Oh, rip my heart right out, man. Rip my heart
It's
right
not feeling
out.
good. I'm not feeling positive. That's if we lose the full team, and I just don't feel positive about them staying together. I really don't. I think that we're crumbling at this point. I think that the cracks and the stress are starting to show, and I think that if you apply any more pressure, it's going to crumble. And I think that 300. I think that one of the best offenses in the Big 12 in the country is going to add some pressure.
Yeah. That's what worries me about the matchup, man, is how good that UCF offense has been and how bad our defense has been for,
We're
pretty much
underdogs
majority
to a
of this whole
4-6
year.
team at home. Like we're not in a good spot.
Yeah, exactly. You never want to be an underdog to a 4-6 team at home right there.
At
Exactly.
home.
That's the key part there is at home. But my prediction, man, I was kind of thinking along the same lines as you for a minute there. I had a prediction and then I scratched it out because I had UCF scored in the 40s as well. But what made me change that was the fact that I started thinking about both these teams running the football. I'm like, I think this game could be a shootout because of how good UCF's offense is. And I think West Virginia's going to have to score points to keep up with them. But then I'm like, both teams are probably going to want to run the football. So maybe that takes the point total down a little bit. So what I ended up landing on, unfortunately, is still a UCF win. Like I said, the fact that they do a great job stopping the run, being the number 1 run defense in the Big 12, worries me. And they're also number 2 in the Big 12 in pass rush grade. And that worries me if they do stop the run and force us into some 3rd and longs. I don't like that. And I don't like the way our defense matches up with their offense. Hopefully our offense is able to do enough to make it a game. I think they will. I think it'll be a close one. I think this team will hopefully continue to fight. That's what I'm thinking, on the optimistic side of things. But I just don't think that they've shown me enough for me to think they're going to be able to do enough to stop this UCF offense. And if they give the UCF the ball back with any time left on the clock, UCF's going to put together a game-winning drive at the end of the game and win it. And that's what I've got going on in my prediction, 31-28. I've got UCF beating the Mountaineers, unfortunately. Steven, what about you, man? Round us out here with the predictions.
I wish that I could be more in line with yours than what mine is, but unfortunately, it's more in line with what Brad has. I'm giving a little bit more credit to our offense than he is, but I don't know. I don't feel confident in our ability to play defense in the secondary against their passing game. I think that what I expect to happen is UCF will come out. They'll probably wear our defense down in the run game in the first half, and then in the second half they'll try to light us up on the back end and try to torch us. And unfortunately, I think it'll work. That adding in that the fact that it's supposed to be a little bit colder of a ball game, maybe some snow. For whatever reason, West Virginia, being from a state that actually gets snow pretty consistently, does not have a record of play. Pretty recently, anyway, does not have a good record of playing in the snow. And really, ironically, the teams that they've played when they do that have most oftentimes been from a state that doesn't get snow and the really warm states. So I don't think that those two things mesh well for WVU, and I just don't think that they've proven to me that they can play well enough offensively to be able to correct all of that. So I'm going to have to go with 42-28 UCF.
All right, so unfortunately, all three not feeling good about this one. We don't like the matchup. We don't like the state of things. And if it ends up being the way that we're all predicting, it's probably the nail in the proverbial Neal Brown coffin, unfortunately. So we're hoping that we're all three wrong. We're going to be cheering for the Mountaineers. Steven and I will be in the stadium. We'll be one of the few braving it out there against the weather conditions and against the poor feelings among the fan base to head up one more time to Mountaineer Field and encourage you guys to do the same if you do have the opportunity to do so. It's the last chance to get to watch these guys at home. You only get about 6 or 7 opportunities to do that per year and only 12 opportunities overall to watch this team, and you won't get to do it again for about a calendar year. So encourage you guys, support this team, get out. No things aren't the best mood-wise right now, but hey, we still love our Mountaineers, still want to see them win. So let's all pull for him, and I hope that me, Brad, and Steven are all wrong here with our predictions, but that's the way that we see it here for the West Virginia game against UCF, unfortunately. But there's still some other Big 12 games going on in Week 13 in the conference. Hard to believe we've already made it that far, but here we are, Week 13, guys.
Hey,
let's talk
time
about
flies when you're having fun, don't it, guys?
That's right. So much fun. So much
Yeah,
fun.
and since we're getting back into the Big 12, I'm going to repoint out, no, the Big 12 is not guaranteed a spot in the college football playoff.
They're not guaranteed one, but they're still going to have someone that ends up in the top 12 of the rankings. So they'll have someone in there because it's like you said, it's the top 5 conference champions. So that's going to be, the 4, the Big 10, ACC, SEC, and Big 12. All 4 of those champions are going to be in that top 12 ranking.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that you lose another like BYU loses another one, and then or Colorado, if Colorado drops one and then beats BYU in the championship game, that could be a team that's 13th place.
True, but even if they are, then you would have to have a team from a 6th conference that is ranked ahead of them. So you know what I'm saying. So even if it's like it's the top 5 conference champs, so that's the 4 Power 4, and then the extra, which will be one group of 5. So then you would have to have another group of 5 team that's ranked higher than them, in addition to Boise State or whoever to keep them out still yet, even if they're not in the top 12 necessarily.
Very unlikely, but like I said, the fact that it's a possibility is crazy.
Yeah, when we're talking about like the records of all the teams involved, I just it's absolutely wild that it's even a topic of conversation.
Yeah, because like I said, Army's having a crushing year, and that's just like when I was looking it up, that's like the 2 schools that said obviously Boise, and that said Army with a great year, they could jump ahead.
It's not impossible.
Yeah, I was saying that's just like, again, to that point, it's like why kill yourselves, battling in and out 50-50 every game.
Yeah.
Because we're not guaranteed, years in the Big 12 where BYU is going to go an undefeated run and Colorado is going to be great. It's not always guaranteed.
It's just like, I don't know, the College Football Playoff Committee, their number one premise as a whole committee is like, how can we get Alabama, Georgia, Texas, and Oklahoma in every single year, or at least as many of those as we can? every single year.
I
I don't
know.
like that.
Well, that's why I think no matter what happens, whoever the Big 12 gets in, I'm going to be pulling hard for. Because if the Big 12, gets someone in, even if it is like chaos ensues and it's a 2-loss team or something like that, it'd be so hilarious for them to only allow, one Big 12 team in and that Big 12 team go on a huge run, go to the semis, go to the Natty or something.
Yeah,
I think that'd
that's
be
what we
just
need.
great.
Yeah.
But like to the same point, like if you hit a moment where the Big 12 doesn't make a 12 team college football playoff, then that's got to be just as damaging as as the ACC not making it last year with an undefeated team, and it just drives home more why are these other conferences? And I think it's things like that are going to keep pushing it towards this 2 conference world that we're just steaming towards.
Yeah, it's inevitably heading that way.
Because
It
you name
is.
me one Big 12 school that's going to sit there and be okay with playing this schedule every year and might not have you know what I mean? And might still just
Oh, yeah. There
end
would
up
be
beating
huge
themselves out because
outrage
you're
if
playing
that
in a
did
you're
happen.
playing in a coin flip game every weekend.
Yeah. The records have to matter more. That's my
Yeah.
opinion on it.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I agree. And I think that the conferences, like teams, how competitive they are from top to bottom need to be taken into account as well because, top to bottom, the Big 12's really tough. There's no gimmies in this conference for sure, as we've seen
Well,
week after week, which is why it's so crazy right now. And we're going to see how it turns out over these final couple of weeks. And let's talk about week 13 here. And got some good games this week that will help go a long way in deciding how that conference turns out. Leading off, though, with Arizona and TCU at 3 o'clock Eastern on ESPN+. Arizona coming off what I considered kind of a surprising win there, handled Houston, who had been playing good. Arizona looked like they were reeling, and then all of a sudden, right the ship, take down Houston. But personally, I'm going to take TCU here, playing at home. I think that Arizona maybe showed some improvements, maybe showed some things last week, but I think TCU is the better team. I think Josh Hoover will be able to throw the ball pretty much at will on Arizona. I'm going to go with the Horned Frogs to get the win here. Now, what about you, Stephen?
yeah, I'm gonna go with the Horned Frogs as well. They've been looking good in the past couple of weeks. Their records also not reflecting of how good of a team I guess that they are. They haven't really been up there all season, but they've looked good recently. I'm gonna pick them too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's been weird. It's been like a quiet year. I haven't heard a ton about TCU this year, but you go look at some of the numbers. The quarterback's putting up really good stats. They're having pretty good numbers overall. So it's been an interesting year for them. But definitely think that TCU is a good pick there. Brad, what about you?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's weird because it's one of the teams that we're not playing this year, so it's like hard to even know how their year's going.
Yeah,
But I agree. I think TCU at home this game is a good one. I don't think Arizona's an incredibly tough team to capture at home. So yeah, I got a good feeling about the Horned Frogs here towards the end of the season.
and we're all in agreement there. I like it. We talked about the Knights and the Mountaineers. 3:30 kick there to be on ESPNU. Texas Tech and Oklahoma State in Stillwater. 3:30 Eastern kick, ESPN Plus for this one. Obviously, Texas Tech will be West Virginia's final opponent of the season. They'll take on next week, but before that, they got to travel to Stillwater, take on the Cowboys, who are still searching for their first conference win. It's so crazy to me to I say that about a Mike Gundy team. Thought that it would eventually be able to find one. They've came close a couple of times, but just haven't been able to quite get it done. Playing at home, Stillwater's a tough place to play. Texas Tech going in there, you never know what could happen. But I just can't find a way to pick Gundy again. I did it time and time again, thinking they were finally going to get it done. So I'm going to have to go Texas Tech this week to get the win over Oklahoma State myself. Brad, what about you?
Yeah, it's been kind of crazy to see Mike Gundy and the Cowboys struggle as much as they have this year. And I don't think that that's going to get remedied now. I know you're not supposed to bet against Gundy, but I think that Texas Tech's just a more solid team against an Oklahoma State team that hasn't been able to get it done. But at the same time, like you're in Stillwater, so Texas Tech better come prepared, or that could be an L.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Stillwater's never a joke, even when Oklahoma State's not a good team. Stillwater's still tough for sure. Steven, what about you?
Yeah, I keep wanting to pick Oklahoma State. I keep wanting to give them the benefit of the doubt because, like you said, the Mike Gundy coach team and a lot of other reasons. Oklahoma State had a really good team, a lot of experience coming back this year, but for whatever reason, they've just massively struggled. So I think adversely, I think Texas Tech has only gotten better as the seasons went along. So I got to go with the Red Raiders.
Sweet. All in agreement yet again, going with Texas Tech there. Next game will be our game of the week. We'll come back to it to wrap up the segment here. But Colorado and Kansas, another one that's a lot more interesting now than it was, a couple of weeks ago or so, as Kansas has really finally found themselves. This will be at 3:30 Eastern time on Fox, playing at Arrowhead Stadium. As we know, Kansas not playing at their home field. Some renovations going on there, so they'll be playing at Arrowhead, welcoming in the Buffaloes, who are playing, as good as anybody in the conference right now. They're looking to secure a spot in the Big 12 championship game. But Kansas, as I said, really found themselves the past few weeks. Jalen Daniels started to play like himself. They pulled back-to-back upset wins against top teams in the top half of the conference there. If they went out, they could reach a bowl game. And they weren't a bad team to begin with. They were in a lot of one-score games, just couldn't find ways to win them. Now they found ways to win them. They've improved quarterback play. Him and the new offensive coordinator have a better relationship. So I'm keeping a close eye on this score throughout the Mountaineer game, despite the fact that we kick off at the same time, because this is going to go a long way in deciding who plays for that Big 12 title at season's end. And both teams right now that are extremely hot and playing really good football. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one turns out. But who do you see emerging victorious between Colorado and Kansas, Stephen?
I really kind of want to go with Kansas just because, um, like you said earlier, they've been playing a lot better brand of football here the last few weeks. But if Colorado's proven anything to me, picking against them so many times this year, it's that they can, whenever the bright lights are on them and they've got to win these types of games, they show up and they do win them. So for that reason, I think that, and again, I think Travis Hunter was already the best player in the country, but I think that he's been playing some of his best football that we've seen out of him here recently. So I don't know. It's hard to pick against the Buffaloes with the way that they're playing right now.
Yep, and I'm gonna agree with you, man. I've ate crow on Colorado all year, and I'm finally on board. I get it now. They're talented, and they're gonna find ways to win football games more often than not. Because if it comes down to the wire, they have the star power to be able to get wins. And this game's on the road. Kansas is playing well, but what's the difference? To me, it's who you just mentioned, Travis Hunter. He plays for Colorado. Colorado will find a way to win. I'm going with the Buffaloes.
And I also
Brad,
want to
what
mention
about
they
you?
just got the number one overall quarterback commit in the country, so it looks like that they're not going to be
Yeah.
left without whenever Shadur goes to the league next year.
Not going anywhere anytime soon. It doesn't look like, unfortunately, they're going to be something the rest of the Big 12 has to deal with for
Yep.
the near future at least. But in the more recent future here, Brad, who do you think wins between them and Kansas?
Yeah, I don't want to pick Colorado, but I'm going to. I just think that, like you guys have said, they've shown that they're a good team. I don't like the way that it's been manufactured, but boy, can't argue with the results. I
That's
would
right.
take that right now.
That's right. So, hey,
Should I
we're all
hire him
thinking
at the
alike
same
thus
time?
far. All in agreement thus far on the picks.
Like I said, you got to
Next up,
respect it.
a Texas showdown here. Baylor and Houston. This one will be at Houston, 7 o'clock Eastern on FS1. I'll go ahead and make my pick here, guys, because I'm rolling with the Baylor Bears, man. They are extremely hot right now. 4 straight wins, obviously. We had to deal with that ourselves last week. They're scoring 40, 50 points across this 4 game winning streak. Their offense is clicking on all cylinders. Jake Spavital is doing a great job. Dave Aranda's figured out enough things with the defense to be able to get wins. They're going to go into Houston and get that win again, make it 5 straight, going with Baylor. What about you, Brad?
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. I'm going Baylor too.
Definitely. Steven?
Yeah, like I said, Aranda's one of those coaches that came into the season on the hot seat. They were darn near about to fire him before the season even kicked off. So he's coached to save his job all season, and they finally caught a hot streak here at the latter part. So yeah, I think I got to go with the Baylor Bears.
Yep. Still all in agreement here. Surprise, surprise. But
Yeah,
handful of games left here. Iowa State and Utah at Salt Lake, 7:30 Eastern on Fox. You guys know how we felt about Utah. You guys know we've said it week after week. We told y'all they wouldn't win the conference. Not only are they not winning the conference, they're in the bottom part of those standings. And I think that Iowa State will continue to put L's in that loss column for the Utah Utes. I'm
Oh
going with
no,
Iowa
guys,
State here.
no, Utah should have been a Big Ten school. Remember,
Oh yeah, they didn't
big
even want to
bad
be
Big
here.
Ten.
Yeah. That would have went even worse for him.
Mhm.
Steven, you picking against Utah? I assume you're going with Iowa State.
Yeah, give me Rocco Becht and the Cyclones.
Rocco Becht and the Cyclones. And Brad, what about you?
Make it a turkey.
Hey, all around in agreement still yet. No surprise there. We don't pick Utah very often on this program, so definitely no surprise. We're going with Iowa State and Rocco Beck to get the win there. Then the nightcap of the Big 12 is Cincinnati traveling to Kansas State there in Manhattan, 8 o'clock Eastern kick on ESPN2. I think that Kansas State, I thought that they would be a little bit better than they were this season, but the Little Apple's a tough place to play, especially at night. I think their crowd will be behind them. I think that it'll do just enough for them to get a victory, but close one. This one's going to be close, I think, but Kansas State edges out Cincinnati, gets the win. I'm going with the Wildcats. Who you got, Brad?
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a fun one. I think I'm also going to go with the Wildcats. I think that they're just a little bit more of a sound team at the moment, and I think Cincinnati's still working out some of their kinks. Plus, West Virginia beat Cincinnati, and they lost to Kansas. So,
Yep.
checks
All
out.
right. I like it. Steven, what do you got, my friend?
Uh, I really don't know who to pick in this one. I guess I'll go with the Wildcats.
I may as well. I mean, we've all been picking the
Wildcats
same
better
one
than
Yeah,
so
Superior.
far,
what?
so got
Why
to keep the
not?
streak going.
Why
Why
not?
So,
not the Wildcats?
why not? All going Wildcats there. Which brings us to, drumroll please, our game of the week in week 13 here in our Around the Big 12 segment. And hey, just like we all had it preseason, BYU and Arizona State playing for a potential spot in the Big 12
Just like
title
I
game,
called it.
just like we all predicted, right?
Yep. Yeah, because we
But funny
predict
enough,
everything
that's what it
correctly
comes
on this
down
show.
to. Of course,
Never
we're
been
always
wrong,
right.
from what I've heard.
But it's funny, man. It's coming down to Tempe, Arizona at 3:30 on ESPN. BYU now with one loss in conference taking on Arizona State, who has two losses. So if they beat BYU, they own the tiebreaker. They then control their own destiny to get to the Big 12 championship game if they can find a way to win. What a coaching job by Kenny Dillingham there at Arizona State. Both of these two teams, arguably the two surprise teams within the conference, and this is going to be one with a lot of eyes on it. Kind of hate that they're kicking off the same time that we are because I'd like to watch it myself. But
That'll be the
much like
one
I
I'm
said about
watching.
Colorado and Kansas, going to keep an eye on this score throughout the Mountaineer game on Saturday. But this one will determine a lot within the Big 12, guys. So, of course, it's our game of the week. BYU and Arizona State on Saturday in Tempe. Who are you rolling with, Steven?
It's a really tough pick for me, man, because I really do. I like both of these teams. I really like the
I was
brand of
about to say
football that
because
Arizona State has
uh,
too.
you're the Storm and Mormon guy, but also Scattaboo's been, your fantasy player
Yeah,
all season.
I was gonna say, man, Cam Scatabo, man. If y'all haven't heard his name yet, that's another really good running back in the country right now. He's getting really overshadowed by Ashton Gianti. But I really want to pick them. I think that they've played really good football this year. Like I said, I think that their head coach is one of the funnest guys to watch in the post
Yeah.
game in the post game interviews when they find him on the field. But BYU, man, I've been a big fan of them all year long. I'm a big fan of their fan base. I think that they've played really good football, even in the big games that they've been tested a few times here recently, and they've came away and they've been able to skate away with a win. I think they did finally lose one. Was it last week or the week before?
Last
It was
week,
still
yeah.
undefeated. Okay, so they did finally drop one, but I still like the way
Kansas got
BYU is
him.
playing. So I'm gonna have to go with the Cougars. Give me BYU.
I
I'm gonna
like.
ride with them till the end.
Hey, I was about to say, at least you're, staying on brand there, still picking BYU and hoping for the bounce back performance after the loss last week. So that's kind of where it is, though. BYU coming off a loss, Arizona State riding high coming into this one in a position not a lot of people thought that they would be, I think, at this point in the season. And to me, these teams are kind of, evenly matched, really. When I look at them, I could go back and forth with and pick either one of them, to be honest with you. I think to me, what I'm going to side with is home field advantage. If it was in Provo, I'd probably pick BYU. It's in Tempe. I think Arizona State's going to have an unbelievable crowd there for this one. They haven't, been this successful in football in quite some time, and they're probably super happy that it's their first season in the Big 12 that it's happened, and they know what's at stake for this game. Stephen mentioned they've got an exciting young coach that hypes things up there, so I think it'll be a great atmosphere, and I think that'll be just enough to push them over the top. Close game. I'm going with the Sun Devils to get the win and potentially set themselves up to maybe reach the Big 12 title game with one more win next week. So I'm going Arizona State in the game of the week. Brad, what about you? Round us out here. What's your pick in our week 13 around the Big 12 segments game of the week?
Yeah, wow, we're going to be all on the same page until the last game.
Yep.
Um, Yeah, no, it should be crazy fun. And definitely at the beginning of the year, would not have picked these two teams to be in the position that they're in, especially Arizona State. What a great coaching job that has been. All credit there. Should be a fun game for anybody that's going to be at it. But ultimately, when it comes down to it for me, I think I'm going to go with BYU. I think that they've just been the more consistent team all year. I know they've had a little bit more of a stumble here, but I think that they're still an excellent team. And I think that, it's going to be a close one, fun one, but give me BYU by a little bit.
All right. I like it. I'm not mad at it, guys. I can't be mad. Like I said, we've been a pro BYU podcast here for a while now, so I can't be too mad about you guys picking BYU. And that's one that I don't really have a rooting interest in. I'll be, not too mad whichever way it goes because either one of those two teams, like I said, they're surprises. So I'm not mad that they're there at the end of the season, being there. And we'll see what happens with them, with Colorado, with the other teams in the race, and we'll continue to cover that here in our Around the Big 12 segments as we make our game picks on the preview shows. And then, of course, we'll be back on the review show to talk about the results, and we'll talk about the Big 12 standings as we'll get set to be heading into the final week then when we're talking about the review of this game against UCF, which hopefully it's a Mountaineer victory. Fingers crossed, West Virginia is able to win the final home game there on senior day, true blue game against the Knights, and maybe maintain bowl eligibility. They're looking to reach it. Still haven't made it yet. 2 games left on the season here. Penultimate game for WVU. We've covered it ourselves, gave you our prediction, and of course covered the Big 12 there a little bit. But any final thoughts, gentlemen? Anything we didn't touch on? Anything you want to mention here before we wrap up shop on episode 210? You got anything, Stephen?
No, these are the times that they really test your loyalty to the fan base, I guess, and just gotta stick with them, man. I know it's tough right now being a fan. I know it's tough supporting them, especially with you if you do it with your dollars, like a lot of us do, and the NIL aspect and everything like that. But that's one thing I'll just say is my war cry to the fan base is don't give up on them. If you want them to be successful in the long run, don't give up on them. So
Well said.
that's
Well
where we're
said.
at
Couldn't
with it.
agree with that more. That's what it's about, man, because we're going to need the fan support to have future success no matter who's at the helm of WVU football leading the program. It's going to be the fan, the fan dollars to the university, the fan dollars to the NIL collective. If those continue, whatever we can do as fans, and of course, showing up on Saturdays, and hope everyone does choose to still show up this Saturday that's capable and able to do so and cheer on the Mountaineers. So well said there. Brad, what about you? Any final thoughts, man?
Nah, man, let's go Mountaineers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what it's all about. 0-12 or 12-0. We're going to root for this team game in and game out, and can't wait to have another opportunity to watch them play on Saturday and cheer them on yet again against the UCF Knights. And we're hoping for better results and hoping for a good result at home finally. We deserve it as a fan base. Hopefully we get it. Regardless of what happens, though, we'll be back to talk about it in our UCF review and reaction podcast, releasing early next week. Appreciate you guys tuning into this episode, whether you tuned in on YouTube. If you did that, be sure to hit the like button, give us a thumbs up. That helps a ton with the algorithm. And subscribe here for a ton of Mountaineer football content coming in the future as we cover not only the season, but we cover the off-season, recruiting, transfer portal, all that good stuff as well. And you can, of course, find this episode on WVSportsNow.com, and we appreciate them hosting our episodes there also. And, of course, you can also find the audio version on any podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, you name it. You can find us there. If you listen there, leave us a rating, preferably a 5-star one, if you would, guys. The Mountaineer season getting close to wrapping up, but we've had a ton of fun covering it throughout 2024, and we'll be here throughout the remainder of the season over these final couple of games. Excited to get back with you guys and talk about the results of this game against UCF, and we're hoping that it's a positive one as we get close to wrapping up this Mountaineer football season. Having said that, as always, I'm Jordan Cruz for Stephen and Brad. Until next time, let's go Mountaineers. If you really want to know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those